So my name is Manmohan. I'm a project officer at MusicTT. I'm not going to be talking very much in this thing. I'm just here to moderate this panel. So first of all, I just want to bring in all our panelists, and then we can just kind of briefly introduction what we're going to talk about. So first of all, I see we have Marcus. So Marcus Braveboy is a singer, songwriter, marketing consultant, and entrepreneur from Trinity and Tobago, known locally for partnering with Young Rod and Mavon to create Trapso. Yeah. And he's also toured the US with Bad Royal, performed at Lollapalooza in Chicago. He's the CEO and chief consultant of his own social media marketing company, IK Consulting. He's also like the CEO and co-owner of Brave House Music, right? Or I should say that Brave House Music is your own company, your own record label. Also the co-owner of The Content Island, which is another company, I guess. We also have Dhanraj Harrypersad. He's the acting GM of ExporTT, responsible for companies' day-to-day activities. His leadership prioritizes the need for export community through building internationally competitive firms, developing solutions and partnerships that makes exporting easier, and focusing on business factors that set out exports in the global marketplace. He's an economist by trade, and he's also spent the last decade focusing on building stronger culture and intelligence-based export decisions. And finally, Narisha Khan. She is a social and marketing research specialist with 16 years of experience in designing and conducting social and market research studies for both local and international organizations in various industries, including academia, trade, child protection, and oil and gas. She holds a Master's of Science and Development Statistics with a specialization in survey research, design, and management from UE. And she's also recording and performing rock vocalist since the age of 18. Well, that's how I know Narisha. So I want to just welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to try and match Karen's energy. I don't know if we're going to get there, but we're going to try our best. So first of all, we're here to talk about how we could use data to kind of launch ourselves into new markets, right? So maybe we can just start our discussion by saying what are the different types of data that we could really utilize. Maybe I will go to Narisha for this.
Hi, good morning, everybody. So with respect to the types of data, so what I want to preface this with though, and I think from the artist side, before you start looking for data, I think it's really important for you to understand you need to know where you're trying to go as an artist, right? So your vision for yourself 10 years from now has to be very clear, because the data has to actually support your strategy of moving from where you are now to where you want to be 5-10 years from now, right? So you should be collecting your data in alignment with that vision, right? So when you have that vision for yourself, what kind of data? Now, there are two aspects of that. One is what type of data, the categories of data. And what I mean by that is like, are you looking? So what you're trying to do is so we are talking about new markets. So that's customer focused, right? So you are looking at what your customer profile is going to look like in different markets. In order to build a customer profile, you have to look at the demographics. So that's the age, gender, education, income, stuff like that, because it will help you make decisions as to where people are that might have the money to spend on the type of stuff you want to sell them. Also, technographic dimensions. What kind of access to technological solutions do they have? Do they have internet access? So you might want to enter a market, let's say, where the technological coverage is not so good. So then how do you get to your customers and let them know about your music in order to utilize the tools that Karen was talking about, right? Then there are other like geographic factors and stuff like that, right? So that's one side of it. And then what form does this data come in? It comes in quantitative, which means you could count things. So like your number of streams, number of this, that, and the other, and also qualitative. What are the qualitative dimensions of your customers? What do they like about your music? And those are the things that you have to describe in words, right? So both types of data have to kind of complement each other, because you could tell, okay, I'm getting this amount of streams in this market, but why? Why am I getting this amount of streams? What do they like about me and my music, right? Is it because, well, I can speak for metal, right? So in my case, I sing about songs in a metal way, but are supposed to be uplifting. Do my audience members connect with that? What are the psychographic aspects of that? And they could either be descriptive, described in words, or count them, the number of something. And I think that's my perspective on that part.
Okay, yeah. So that's really great. So we're talking two types of data there. So qualitative and quantitative. Now, when we're talking about this kind of data, so Dhanraj, when we looking at some of the tools for collecting this type of data, what are some of the kind of things that you all would use, possibly at ExporTT, to analyze and look at, well, not even analyze, just to collect the data at first? I think you're muted. I'll unmute you.
Okay. All right, cool. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, just want to follow up on Narisha's point and the importance of knowing what you want to do as an artist, what you're hoping to accomplish, because that sort of guides the sort of data you want to get. What type of data you need? You need good data. That must be relevant data as well, right? So it really depends on what you're trying to do, what your objectives are, and then the data sort of helps you with your decision making as you go through that process. Now, I am in the field of exports. It's a lot of manufactured goods and stuff like that. But we do have a methodology in terms of how we go through finding the necessary data and doing the analysis. And I actually took a look at the music industry in terms of how that methodology would apply. And there are a couple of steps that we look at. And the first is really product identification. In case of music, I guess that deals with your product in the genre, the subgenre, things like beats per minute, if you have explicit content or not. Narisha mentioned demographics, who is it going to be targeted to, gender, age group. So you need to have a sense of that first, how your product is defined. And then that sort of guides you along the way in terms of gathering data and then trying to identify markets. Like the other thing is, music has been sort of evolving into not just music as a product, but there's a lot of periphery things happening right now in terms with a lot of video content, social media following, clothing and apparel and stuff like that are being attached to artists as well. So again, there's a total product that you might be looking at here. And if you're trying to gather data, the same places that you're going to gather data about music, is the same places you're going to be gathering data about apparel. Or, telling like a whole bunch of detail about social media and Google Analytics and stuff like that. So, yeah, it all depends on what you're doing. And I think it starts with how you define your product and the process of your product. Then we go into something like market identification now. There are a few, I had a look at it because, like I said, it's not my field, but I did have a look at it, and it was very interesting and exciting to see the amount of tools that are out there, things like chat metric, next big songs, sound charts, etc. That there are free versions of them, but they're also subscription based. And I think the cost is not as high as I would have expected. So the chat metric for some of those features, it costs around like 140 US, which is not too bad, but it allows you and gives you access to a bunch of different data. And we're not talking data that you download in an Excel file and then you want to fight up with YouTube and there's a pivot table and try to analyze and stuff like that. It actually gives you a lot of that data graphics and visuals, so that anybody who's interested in looking at the data, looking at trends, trying to make decisions, they are easily able to go and check a couple of parameters, run a search, and be able to see what is happening in the field. So I think there are some parallels in terms of, if I were to look at data apply my methodology to music, I'm seeing that there are similar sources, and in some cases they're even better sources because it is much rich information in things like chart metric that I could get in terms of some of the databases I'm looking at, because I still get a lot of dreary lines and a bunch of numbers that then I have to maybe analyze, put into Microsoft Power BI or some other visualizing app to make it, a bit digestible to say like my board members or company owners who really are not interested in that sort of nitty-gritty that might excite, researchers who operate in the back end.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to I wanted to ask a question, and I feel like this might be important, and Dhanraj would be the person to answer. So one of the things that I was thinking about, like when I am doing research for myself in any capacity, right, whether as a musician or for a day job, my rule of thumb when it comes to the credibility of data, which is what Dhanraj is addressing, how valid it is, how reliable it is, how can you use it to make accurate decisions, right? And I think the rule of thumb that I use is to go as close to source as possible. So if I would love to hear Dhanraj's take on, okay, if you're looking for music data, so official statistics do not really, I mean, a lot of it is a bit flawed, so you can't really go on a government website at this point today. I know that there are being movements to change that situation, but in terms of going on a government website to find data, and this is apart from the other online tools that will automatically track the quantitative data related to your product movement, right? Going close to source. So I like to, just on the ground kind of talk to my, like if I go out and fans are engaging with me and stuff, I talk and I ask them questions and stuff like that. So I get very close to the source there. When you go, when you're streaming on YouTube, you can get the analytics on YouTube. So I just like to go as close to source as possible, and I would like to hear Dhanraj's take on that. Like, where is the sources of these data? If you have any.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So it depends on what you're looking at, right? So I think there are different types of data available. You have your streaming and sales analytics. You have A&R, music discovery, then you have your market intelligence as well. So for streaming and sales analytics, I saw that Nielsen's Music Connect, and I think Nielsen is like a huge market research and data company, right? I think one of the largest, even on my side of business, they are one of the big ones that have access to a bunch of data. It's quite expensive to get a subscription to them to access all that they have. There's alpha data as well. So Nielsen's Music Connect, they actually power Billboard charts. So they are close to the source data in terms of gathering that information. And then alpha data, they power the Rolling Stones charts. So again, they would have their sources. Then you have companies that are very close to, or they are subsidiaries of larger music groups. For instance, like Soda Tune, which is big in music discovery and A&R, they are owned by the Warner Music Group. So again, maybe Warner sees the benefit of gathering these data, analyzing it for their own benefit, but now they're able to provide a service as a result. So I think it's pretty close. Then you have all the different streaming apps. I know Spotlight has their own analytics, but they have Next Big Sound, Sound Charts, Spot on Track, Chart Metric as well, that will pull from those streaming sites, YouTube, social media, etc. So I think we're in the age, luckily, there's no shortage of information. It's just whether or not you have access to it. But I think a lot of it is fairly accessible, but you might have to pay. And I think that's probably what some of the other firms would do. They would pay, acquire the data, and then package it nicely so that they could charge a fee that people want to pay,
Yeah, so Dhanraj, let me just make one quick little thing. Can you just try not using your earbuds? The audio is coming out a bit distorted for us.
Sure, no problem.
Because I mean, everything you say in this is so very important. I don't want people missing that. So like, I use chart metric a lot as well, because is, to me, one of the best ways to discover. It kind of brings the data together from all the different streaming platforms and stuff, and you can get to really see a lot of the data. But so Marcus, you have a bunch of different hats you wear. So you do social media for other people, plus you have to manage your own career, plus you have your own label. So what kind of tools do you kind of use to get data for yourself and for your other clients? Because not just as an artist, but as a label owner as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just doing a quick mic check. You can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Everybody get me. All right. So as Narisha and Dhanraj were saying, I think I kind of use a mix of both methods to collect data for my strategies. So I do use the Spotify, Apple Music, like Spotify for artists, Apple Music for artists, YouTube backend data, social media data, etc. But on Narisha's point, I think where I have been a lot different from a lot of artists in Trinidad, I have seen the power of being on the ground, I use that quote unquote, by DMing persons and sometimes just asking them information. So I would use hashtags to just narrow down the category of fan or target market individual I want to reach out to or get through to with my music, and just ask them a question. Just say, hey, talk to somebody from Seychelles, don't know anybody from Seychelles, and just have a conversation, talk to them for like half an hour. So there's that aspect of it. I also, like before COVID, when I would travel a bit more, especially to the States, anybody from an Uber driver to somebody in a restaurant, any opportunity to play my music for somebody. I could be at a Lime and somebody said, he's an artist and I play my music, but I'm always collecting data. I'm always doing market research, and I also do the same thing in Trinidad. I over the past 2 years, my target market has shifted, especially towards making music for the female listeners. And that's a bit different because in Trinidad, I'm known as a rapper, singing more like hype music for the guys. And then with EDM, I started to do what they would like for my vocals is something more aggressive. But over the past 2 years, I started to experiment with a smoother, sexier tone of voice. And with that, I was able to, definitely ask different female friends or just sometimes just random dancers or DJs, around the world, what they think, and just get feedback, just get our perspective. So for me, I've been using both aspects, and on the side of the Apple Music and Spotify, I think those they lay out markets pretty well. So I can see all over the world where my listeners are coming from on Spotify. Right? I think I definitely would say like Latin America and Europe are the two main markets for me outside of my market in Trinidad.
Okay, that actually transitions really good into the next point. So, we're all here to talk about data launching us into new markets, right? So, yes, we collect all the data and then we could go through it and analyze it with the different tools on, as you say, artists with Spotify. We could go to a data professional like Dhanraj or Narisha and let them actually go through and systematically analyze the data for us and help us develop strategies. But the point is, the Trinidad and Tobago market is pretty small. It's not that many people. The potential to reach larger markets is better than ever it has ever been. So let's talk about some of these markets. So potential new markets, the Latin market, for example, or the Chinese market. I know all of you've had experience looking at these different markets and ways we could position ourselves. Like, what's an emerging market would you say for that's emerging economically and maybe culturally, that what would align with our brand, with us, our music in Trinidad and Tobago? Anybody who else wants to take it? Maybe I'll go to Dhanraj first. All right, Dhanraj, I think you have to go in your mic settings and edit it, or just plug back in your headphones. Maybe I'll talk to Narisha while you sort that out.
Oh, I thought that was gonna happen. Right. So when you ask that question, right, you just have to remember that I was focused on the rock side of things. So in Trinidad and Tobago, rock has a very teeny weeny, very minuscule market. So just from my perspective, how I kind of got that information was I was attending a music conference, which I do encourage people, if you can afford to, and put that as part of your strategy, in addition to paying for some data services, if you could, do those things, because the more information you get. So what I like to do is talk to experts in the field. So at this music conference, I was speaking to some panelists who actually work in labels internationally. So they were saying, based on my, so I participated in the showcase. They said, based on what I have to offer, the markets they suggest looking at is Brazil, which is huge for metal, and Japan. Now, if I'm going into those markets, there are two things. Number one, the language barrier. So, like right now, I'm learning French because I actually want to maybe do some music in Canada. So you have to kind of invest in yourself. You could never lose from learning something new. So try to learn some Portuguese if that's where you're going, even just to be at the conversational level, because you have to connect with the people. No matter how much data you get on the quantitative side of things, you're trying to sell your product to people. So you need to talk to them. Mandarin. So I know Arthur Lockjack used to offer, not too sure right now, but they used to offer Mandarin for business purposes. So you go, you learn the language, because as Marcus said, nothing I think can substitute for on the ground person to person interaction and research. So you have to find out where the venues that I could, or where the people. So Marcus talked about like catering to the ladies. Where do the ladies hang out in Brazil or in Japan, right? So I mean, yeah, learning Japanese, I'm not too sure where you could learn that, but the language barrier is one thing, and then you have to learn about their culture and how they move. Where are the venues that I can sell my product? So even if it's not music, merch. If you have merch on your website, you need to have that language translation as well on your website, so people from those markets can access your product and buy and make decisions about how they want to spend their money on you, right? Dhanraj. Marcus. Oh,
Yeah.
I just plugged back in my buds because I'm not sure what is happening there. But yeah, I think Latin America, if I were to single out a market, it would be Latin America at this point in time, because I think there's a close affinity in terms of like culture. So I think it's easy to adopt, particularly some of our local music, and stuff like that. Radio station in Costa Rica that is reggae all day, 24/7, and I was driving around in a colleague's car, and that's all he was running, reggae right through. And I was like, "What is this? Some sort of album?" And he's like, "No, this is radio." So, and then you move around and you hear the music playing like all over the country and stuff like that. So you might think Latin America is reggaeton and Mark Anthony and that sort of stuff. But music reaches places, and people do have an interest in different types of music. So I think in all corners of the world, you'd find like someone has an interest in a particular genre of music, and they listen, and they fanboy or fangirl out, and they want to search to see, who are the different artists. And I think also the streaming apps, they really allow you to discover different artists now by creating those playlists, using AI to learn your likes, and then making those recommendations and suggestions. So for me, I mean, if I were to look at a market, I think it would be Latin America. China, I know you mentioned that, Maarten, but there are some accessibility issues with China right now, and I recently heard some reports about the limiting time for kids in terms of how long they could be on TikTok, how long they could play games and stuff like that. So it's like government instituted or government policy that dictates how much time. So there's a lot of restrictions in terms of the content that they have. So I think that's gonna create some problems for an artist, for producers, when they are, developing their content, because then you have to keep that in mind. This content is for there. Therefore, in my creation, I need to make sure that I do not do these things, and it's sort of, it could restrict your creativity. And maybe I don't make any music, so maybe Narisha and Marcus could speak a bit more about that in terms of how you create for a particular market, because I think that is important when you're looking at maybe like a more conservative market that you're trying to get into. When you're doing a lot of explicit content, clearly that's not going to work there,
Yeah, I think Marcus has a good bit of experience with this, because I've produced some Marcus stuff with translators in the studio. So
yeah. So Maarten has actually seen that firsthand. So for me, I can just talk about the different markets. Firstly, the Latin market. Dhanraj, you are very correct. I remember I was always a music nerd since secondary school days, and I used to spend a lot of time. Well, I shouldn't say this now, but bootlegging music online on all these websites. And I remember there was this one website that had every dancehall rhythm and song I knew, but in Spanish. And I always found it interesting. I think it was from Panama. And now, like, looking back, I remember watching a documentary about it. But a lot of Jamaicans moved to Panama to, I think it was to work on the Panama Canal and stuff. And they settled there. So I think that they had this kind of hybrid, just like how the Colombians and Venezuelans are settling in Trinidad. There was this mix of culture. So why I say that, reggaeton really looks at dancehall and to extent Caribbean music as like a father-mother figure of their music. So dembow, which is from the Dominican Republic, and reggaeton, they really admire old school dancehall. And how that registered in my mind again as an adult is from watching Narcos on Netflix. Right? I'm sure some of y'all know the show Narcos with Pablo Escobar and stuff. And I realized like I was hearing rhythms because I know dancehall. I'm a dancehall nerd as well. I know a lot of the rhythms from the 90s were playing on the soundtrack. There's this one particular scene where I was hearing a rhythm that I'm really familiar with. And then dembow music is actually influenced by a song from Shabarangs called Dembow. So for me now, being an artist from Trinidad who does this experimental dancehall, experimental raga soca style, the Latin market naturally just welcomed me with open arms, because I am like a cheaper Sean Paul or like a cheaper Shaggy, or and I see that I recognize that during this pandemic, I just started to message persons in that market. And on Narisha's point, you have to be open-minded enough. Now, I did Spanish in school, in secondary school, and in no way can I speak Spanish fluently. But there's Google Translate. And I use Google Translate to talk to everybody. And I'm doing the same, as you mentioned, the Asian market. I'm working with some producers from Taiwan. And in the beginning, we had a translator, like a mutual Taiwanese individual who could speak English and Mandarin. But after a while, he wasn't accessible all the time. So I had to make the effort and use, not Google Translate, this Mandarin English translator I found on Google. And I'm having these conversations with them. And my life consistently goes that as soon as I forget, so I might be talking to Maarten in the studio and I just see a bunch of, Mandarin writing on my phone, but I think that persons just have to be open-minded. So I could speak on that in terms of the creation of music. So I'm still trying to understand the Taiwanese market. I know that like China in particular, even Korea, may be a bit more conservative, but the genre of music I've been dabbling with them is like trap EDM. So I could kind of slightly get around the edginess aspect. I can be a bit edgy, but I still have to be respectful and I ask a lot of questions. So I'm always asking, can I say this? Can I say that? What does this mean in your culture? Because sometimes when they tell me things that doesn't really make sense to me, and I realize they're trying to translate into English. And then with the Latin culture, I think it's a perfect match for Caribbean because our culture is so similar, from the food to the way we interact with each other, our friendly nature, even our music, the BPMs of our music, the instruments used in our music. So I feel like I really don't understand why there's such a barrier between the Latin and Caribbean industry. The only thing I could think of, and from talking to the Latin DJs and artists and stuff, is the language barrier. And I think it kind of comes from our side too, of not wanting to explore, not wanting to come out of the comfort zone. Like, oh God, why I can't speak English? I think that we kind of have that, right? So I think that artists just need to be a little more, creatives generally just need to be a little more open-minded, because they definitely would love to work with us. But how would they meet us if we don't go out of our way to meet them halfway or meet them full way, And then the other thing I just want to talk about really quickly is just image. I think I realized that certain attributes, example, having a ass, or even a simple thing like smiling, right? Like if you smile a lot in Trinidad, we say, oh, he's a real glad man, right? But in Europe, because those countries are historically war countries, the new generation really gravitates towards happy music. So music like soca, dancehall, reggaeton, Afrobeats, they love that, And I think these are little, I was able to find this information out, not necessarily from the data on the apps, but from talking to these individuals.
So if I may, just my perspective on that, because I also, again, as a musician side, I just want to emphasize again, it depends on your strategy, right? So the thing for me is that, and I just saying as an artist introspectively, right? I want to emphasize what Marcus is saying about you stepping outside of your comfort zone. Nothing, no success doesn't come without hard work. And part of that is opening your mind and exposing yourself to a whole set of different things, right? So for me, though, in terms of the creation aspect of music, I don't think, because of what music does for me, is more therapeutic and it's very personal to me. So the content of my songs wouldn't be something that I would want to necessarily adapt in that way. The way that I am kind of trying to circumvent that is by learning the language of French so that I could translate it into a way that makes that is authentic to me, right? So in that sense, I am thinking carefully about why I am making this decision for myself. Because the thing is, do I go in the direction where I create something with the market solely in mind, and then have the, let's say, the more potential for mass sales? Or do I stay authentic to what I'm doing music for? Now, that is not going to give me access to a bigger market, but it might give me access to a more loyal market. So as a rock artist, we don't really mind being underground and having small niche markets, right? Because that's how I think we are accustomed to it, to a certain extent. So I think that there are the two paths that you can go down. And so why I'm giving my experience or my perspective on that is because I think the focus of this is what you want as a musician, to let the data then guide you in terms of which market. So I might therefore, let's say, because I'm doing that, might select a European market that has a underground metal following, that then, even though it's not a mass market, it is somewhere where I connect better with my music. But the point is, how do I know that they exist there? Because I was following Lynchpin, and I know that in Germany they are like metal, or in Latin America, Suriname and stuff like that, where the markets are and stuff like that. So you can make either decision to the best for your musical career, and then let the data help you make other decisions regarding your strategy. Right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I totally agree with that. It has to start somewhere. You need to have a vision and understand your product. One more point I want to make about markets, though, is like our definition of it, because we talking about China, we're talking about Latin America. These are huge regions. China is, the provinces, like a city is like a country, right? So Shanghai alone, or Beijing, that's a country in itself. So and they're different. If we were to look at Colombia and Bogota, that's versus like Cartagena, right? So Cartagena is on the coastline. Well, relaxed, chill Caribbean vibe. If you visit there, you might think you somewhere in the Caribbean chilling, music. Everybody just gets like kind of laid back. Bogota, no, it's like a city, like New York, right? So it's much more professional. It's cool. It's a much colder climate. It's all the way up in the mountains. So for some reason, I find there's a relation between climate and how people feel and how they act. Like I have some friends in Toronto and stuff. When it's winter, they're like totally depressed. So again, like you get that kind of vibe, like Bogota versus Cartagena. Now, if you are looking at Colombia as a market, you might say, well, all right, cool. You have this sort of perception, and if we go back to Narcos and stuff like that, I mean, people have a perception of what Colombia is. But when you actually get there, if you go to Cartagena, you'll be like, well, where is this? This can't possibly be Colombia. So I think understanding, even within a country, that there may be different markets geographically, but also how you define a market. I mean, is it a group of people with similar characteristics? Are you looking at demographics? You could get pretty targeted in terms of how you define a market. And the more targeted you get, it saves you, well, it gets you a little more focused. And then you can dedicate more of your resources to just the people that are likely to buy in to what you have on offer.
So sorry, I know I'm gonna cut into Maarten there, but I just want to touch two things you just said, right? So the first is that when the thing is that everybody says how the market for music is very fickle, right? And what I want to point out on that is the reason why people call it fickle is because music is connected to people's emotions. You yourself as a consumer of music, if you really think about it, like when I'm sad, I like to listen to Deftones, their new song Ceremony, and I'll listen to it over and over and over to get into my feelings. Everybody's feelings changes on a day-to-day basis. So sometimes they might be feeling like this now, and that connection to the weather, yes. So you have to think about the psychology of your consumer as well, and that would help you. So the market, I think, is the commonalities that bring the people together, and you have some stability because people really don't change from day to day, but the emotions do. So that's what you have to kind of, I think, an important part of that. And I can't remember the second point right now. So when I remember, I will, sorry about that.
No, so a couple of really important things came up today. So yes, we could customize content for markets, but authenticity in an artist, and I think this was brought up yesterday with Karen Niles and Dr. Brian Kahn and stuff. So that authenticity of an artist is always kind of the main thread that kind of goes through how an artist kind of creates and how an artist decides to market himself. I know, even though, and I know Marcus, like, no matter what you do and what you're doing, it's always you. It's like you're doing a R&B style song to like a hard EDM song. It still sounds like you, and it maintains you. So, like, I mean, how do you kind of maintain that authenticity even though you're going through like maybe 10 different markets for 10 different types of songs? What's your thought process?
That's a real good question. That's a real good question, Maarten. I think honestly that's something I've battled with because I'm an artist from Trinidad who has dabbled in possibly every genre, including para music. I think it's a gift in a way because I'm open-minded and I think I am, talented enough to do that. But the curse in it is that it's like you don't master any, so I've had to narrow down and decide, okay, of all the genres and all the styles of music I do, which one is going to get me to that win? But to answer your question, I think the main thing in common is just really my tone. I think I've found a way to keep the same style and tone across genres. So I am the same person, not only in terms of topic, but just in terms of how I sound. I think uniqueness of my voice in particular has worked for me there. But I'm now at this crossroad where, as Narisha was mentioning, marketability in different markets and knowing content and stuff. The style of music that I do is chanting or like rapping in a Caribbean accent. And there's no market yet for Caribbean rap, or I would say a serious Caribbean rapper. Like nobody, at least from in terms of Trinidad, nobody globally really looking right now. Maybe because it hasn't been created yet, but for a Trinidadian rapper or chanter talking about serious stuff like world issues and so the music that the world tends to like from the Caribbean, and I just more mean in my particular sector of the industry, they like party music. And that's been difficult for me because I think I'm somebody with different emotions, as Narisha was saying. Like sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I want to speak out against, for and against different social issues happening in the world. But I don't want to say I can't, but the market isn't trying to hear that from me right now. So I think I have to play the game of
Marcus, I think you froze.
of giving them what they want. I don't know if I got cut off there. Y'all hear me?
Yeah, you just froze for a second.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, so just to wrap up, I think that I make mainly party music, but even with those party songs, it's still authentic to me. I'm somebody who enjoys party and hitting the club. But within those songs, I tend to at least have some lyrical content. So I found a balance there, but it's difficult, as in I would like to challenge the status quo and make some songs that are about serious issues, but still a hit from the Caribbean. And I don't think anybody has really been able to do that as yet. But understanding the market is important. At the end of the day, you have to play the game. You have to make music that people want to hear. This is a business. So while I'm not gonna stop making music from the heart and more serious lyrical songs, I do have to focus on what product is going to be exported successfully.
And just to tack on to that, right? You see, so in the whole scheme of life things, I have a day job because I don't want to have to do that. If you understand what I'm saying. So it's like I have to balance so if I make the decision to be just a small market authentic artist and just stay true to my complete self because I ain't really care about how much music I could sell, right? If that's the decision that I make after I get a job to pay the bills, right? So it really also depends on if you're really going to make music a job, you do have to make some compromises. So it is a balance, right? Do I want to? I mean, I love my day job, right? So, but if I didn't like my day job, right, I would have to make some different decisions about what I'm doing, right? So it because of that, so Marcus has his label, he has those things, and he is selling music solely because of that. He has to make a different set of decisions that I have to, and consider different things about the market than I would have to. So I just wanted to put that in as a juxtaposition for anybody who is trying to sort these things out in their head and make those decisions and stuff. You have the freedom, but there is a balance. You might have to compromise. You might have to do different. All right, that was the second point. As I was saying that, you kind of sometimes. So Dhanraj said you have to try to use your money in the most effective, your resources in the most effective way. That's what you're trying to get the data to tell you. Where do I spend the limited resources that I have in the best way to get the most traction? Right. So then I was telling him, like, I have no savings because on a let's say a monthly basis, annual basis, I have to have a plan for what I'm going to do with music this year. And I budget a certain amount and I say, okay, what can I do with this? Can I pay somebody to do a video and then just do the video? And then what about follow-up? But you have to make those choices about your spend. And this is where the data will help you to, okay, so do I do this? Do I pay the money for some classes to learn a different language, to write some songs in that language to connect with that audience. Is the market big enough? Can I sell enough merch? Can I sell enough recorded music? Those are the decisions that you have to make. So I was just trying to put it in a practical context a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's really what the conversation should be about. So what I want to do, I want to just flip the switch just a little bit. So, and I didn't bring this up before because I wanted this to be a kind of on the spur of the moment kind of discussion, right? So we can look at something like Trinidad music, right? I really want to look at that genre and those artists, right? We can kind of colloquially say that that's like the fastest growing genre in Trinidad and Tobago. We may not have the actual physical hard data right now to prove that, but I mean, everybody can look from the outside and look at the YouTube streams and the penetration that genre has been having on the market. Could say that is one of the fastest growing genres in Trinidad and probably in the Caribbean as a whole. So, I mean, if we were to look at it as a case study, what do you think would be the best next step for them in collecting that data, organizing, and looking at new markets to penetrate? And I open that to anybody who wants to like even think about that.
Yeah, I can take a stab at it. I think Trinidad is very interesting. I'll just give you a quick story. My first day in London, just before the pandemic, I was just walking on the road and I heard somebody ponging a Trinidad song in London, you know. So, and I stopped the guy and I asked him if he's from Trinidad. He said no, he just loves Trinidad music. So it just shows that Trinidad music is spreading beyond, you know, even with the artist's imagination. Structure, I think, is the issue with Trinidad. I know I have a few brethren who involved in Trinidad, and they are trying to structure it a bit more. So I think in terms of you know, even getting all the music on the streaming platforms didn't happen initially. I think that took time. It's now available, but I do believe that ownership is on I think the producers own the songs. So that in itself gets tricky because if there are any fallouts, you know, with the producer and the artist doesn't really have any leverage. And I think taking it to the next stage, ownership is important, understanding the industry is important. So it seems like the producers are the ones more knowledgeable about the music side of things, and the artists are more knowledgeable about the marketing side of things. They know how to put the props in the video, whether it's gun props, whether it's going in certain neighborhoods, and whether it's calling certain individuals' names and songs. So for me, I think it's a phenomenon for sure, but the structure is what will make or break that genre. And I think the Caribbean is a big market. Some of the Trinidad artists are touring the Caribbean, but I think the next stage is them really getting those work visas and traveling abroad. And the limitation there is, given the nature of what you're singing about, or the backgrounds of some of the individuals singing, I think those situations may get a little problematic, like getting a visa, a work visa, you know, being able to travel and that kind of stuff. So in terms of the data, as we focusing mainly on data, I can't speak for them, for that community within that regard, but I don't know if they are actively measuring the data and using it strategically. I know that they definitely have the social media savviness because they understand algorithms. I'll say that, especially like YouTube algorithms, the especially Instagram algorithms, because I think it's a very millennial genre. But I just don't know if they're using that information strategically.
So you think it's more like wild shots in the dark with them, or do you? Because I mean, it's making such an impact. Like the academics are speaking about it. I know that for sure. Like in our presentation, Dr. Susan Burke was praising that music as, you know, an evolution, you know, and looking at it as the Trinidad version of what gangster rap was in the 90s for America, you know, and that it is a voice of people that are in a certain situation, and it is resonating with many people all over the world. And it seems like it's reaching those people, and I don't know if it's on purpose. And I mean, if they were to try and reach marginalized communities and stuff, how would we go about getting some of that data? What would be the data we would need to know is, we want to get to marginalized communities. Where would we look for data like that?
Okay. So I feel like here's where we could put what let's say the other panelists and I have been saying together, right? So if I was them, so I'm gonna put myself in their shoes, right? The first thing, because they are so very social media savvy, you need to get those counts from the social media outlets, right? So whether you're talking about Instagram, hits, streaming, whatever it is, you need to get that data. Where are the people coming from? So this is where the demographics, the geographics. So you're looking at what can you find out about whether they're male or female, the age group that is listening to your music and consuming the most of it. How much are they spending on it for various time periods? How are they consuming it? Whether it is via a specific social media platform more than others, and why is that happening? So then you get those overall counts, right? So we're going from large to small. Then, okay, if it is in these specific markets, so you could count 5 markets, right? So Marcus is saying that anecdotal evidence, which I'll just, so anecdotal evidence is stuff that you're just observing, but observations are data. Right. So even though nobody is verifying or doing it in a systematic way, once you observe something, that is data that you could use to make decisions for yourself, right? Which is what people normally do on a daily basis. So you're going from those counts that the social media platforms will give you. What can I say about these things? And this is where the analysis comes in. So most often you will get the platform analyzing the data for you in a frequency analysis, which means they will tell you how many of what type of response you're getting, right? So then take that data. All right, is the market, let's say UK, right? What can it tell me about the people in the UK? And then based on that, if they say in this majority males, right? In a specific age group, let's say 18 to 25, what are the psychographic commonalities between these people, right? If it is, as Maarten said, like in I can't remember what you call it, marginalized communities, right? You see, okay, so in my experience doing survey research in marginalized communities, you have to go into the community. If they're not connected via the internet and whatever, which is a possibility, the way to reach them is like any other marginalized community. So let's think about it in the context of Trinidad, right? What are the access points, the logistical access points? So if you can't get to them on the internet or whatever, but they're spending their time in a specific venue, a specific area, where are they accessing your music, right? Are they listening to it on the radio? But even in that case, marginalized communities, the access to those communities is mostly in person, right? Or even if it's just like one, you're going one interaction and dropping off some stuff, but you have to have follow-up as well. So the thing is that marginalized communities are a bit difficult, but because that requires, in my experience, more footwork, right? Because you can't use the mediation of the internet a lot. And then marginalized communities also more often than not buy into your personality more than they do, because they have a real thing with authenticity. So if they could get access to you as a human being, that connection, you can't really replace that. So that's what I have learned in my experience of collecting survey data. Like when we are doing surveys that are national, in those communities you have to send interviewers in, because the human to human interaction, they like to answer questions in person if they need explanations and that kind of thing. And when you do that, connect with their humanity, they really appreciate those things. So I think if I had to recommend is to find out the most characteristics that you can from the online platforms, and then use that to kind of strategize how you're going to interact, especially with marginalized communities. Do you have any information on their characteristics as people? I don't know if I answered the question, but I tried.
Yeah, I think Maarten, just I think you're saying that persons are trying to understand Trinidad. The best, at least my personal explanation for it, I think that Trinidad represented part of society, a huge part of society that the government and the media kind of pushed aside or hid under the rug. As in, when we talk about Trinidad, we promote carnival culture, especially like the soca, the chutney, the calypso, etc. But carnival especially started to become less inclusive. From the parade, in terms of carnival bands and the person storming the band look a certain way are from certain communities. So I think that is a combination between that and the new generation wanting something different that speaks for them. And like growing up on the dancehall, that because the dancehall I grew up on, I'm 36, right? It was more party dancehall, but this new generation grew up on more like trap dancehall or kind of angry-ish revolutionary dancehall or dancehall just talking about how much money you have and that kind of stuff. So I think they wanted a local version of that, and I think Trinidad just happened at the right, because it's not the first time dancehall was experimented in Trinidad. This has been happening since the 80s, right? Or the 90s. But I think it's just the right time. And I think timing is everything. But the question is it a fad or is it something that has, longevity like the other genres, like the most stable genres in Trinidad, soca, chutney, calypso. The other genres, hip hop, rock, pop, etc., tend to come in fads. So I think that's the main question. And I think in terms of the real fans of Trinidad, if there's a next cycle of artists, because there's urban music, there's much loyalty with urban music. Somebody's popular for 3 years. If you get 3 or 4 years, you get a lot. And then something else happens. A new genre happens, or a new crop of artists from the same genre trying something different happens. So I think the evolution of Trinidad is important. And relating it back to data, I think that if I was them, just like how Narisha was saying, I think they need to expand to other markets. So there are ghettos internationally or marginalized communities, right? And they all feel the same way right now in terms, and that is why drill music is so popular. That is why dembow music is so popular, because it expresses it's almost like the voice of the voiceless. So I think if Trinidad artists, were wanting to strategize, they should be collaborating with persons from, and I know they've started, some have started, but it's not happening fast enough. And the question is, would this fad end before somebody gets signed? Or somebody goes to the next level. And I say that from experience with hip hop, in terms of there was a wave of trap soul and like hip hop starting to resurge again in Trinidad. But when it didn't happen, when that next stage didn't happen, something else came up, So that's just a point I wanted to make as well.
Yeah, if I may, oftentimes you don't have the data you want or all the data you need to really make an analysis, and you really have to start with the data you have, right? And in this case, I'm hearing that there is a lack of data, but in this day and age, data is being recorded all over the place, right? Especially if you're utilizing social media, which I think is largely being utilized for that genre. So there is some data recorded somewhere. I agree with Marcus in terms of maybe there's a lack of strategy and structure there. And by utilizing what data you have, developing those strategies and structures, you can actually ensure the longevity of the genre and its success, rather than you have something good right now. usually the problem is trying to get something good. You have something that is good right now. So you just need to have enough data to develop some sort of strategy. And I think Karen was talking about, Google Analytics and searches and stuff like that. Marcus mentioned that he's traveling abroad and he's seeing people hearing the sound all over the place. We all know we have diaspora all over the place, all over the world. And it's almost as they are as connected as us in terms of what's happening in the ground. Because my cousin, New York, he knows what is trending, what is the new song and stuff before I even know. And he knows the news and stuff like as well. So I think there's a lot of connectivity out there, and we really need to harness it. If this is something that we think has the potential, like in my work, I mean, if there's something that has a product or a service that has a high level of export potential, we try to encourage that, provide the necessary data, but also try to secure the links as well, because I think that is the next step in terms of having someone on the ground there who knows what is happening, knows the industry, knows how to grow it, the distribution, events, stuff like that could be organized. So yeah, I think there's huge potential there, but you utilize the data, you try to build out that structure and strategy, and then soon, you build more data, you refine things, and then it grows from there. Because I think maybe they are unaware of, I don't know how many of them are on these streaming sites or anything like that, or aware of Google Analytics to know, well, hey, people are actually listening to my song in songs in the UK or in Houston or in Atlanta and stuff like that. Maybe I need to push more ads or push more my Facebook ads and stuff like that more in those specific geographic regions, so that it picks up a bit more steam and gains more popularity and stuff like that. So
yeah, so I think, and I just again talking, and I don't know for sure, but speaking to some of them and speaking to some of the producers, the business model is very different than the traditional business models in Trinidad, where the producer owns all the masters and the artist only owns his publishing. And even at sometimes they share any publishing with the producer, so they have very limited control on what data they're allowed to collect and what how they can't even see where they're penetrating, because everything's managed by a cadre of producers that just kind of works that whole industry, But yeah, I think that was a real good discussion. I really wanted to touch on a couple other things, but we have like 15 minutes left. But let's just talk about just one last thing, is customizing that content for markets. We talked about the authenticity part, which was really important, but I really want to talk about that the part of the language barriers and those kinds of things, which everybody was kind of mentioning. And I would like to look at it from look at the Latin American market in specifics, right? Because again, that market it's right there geographically. It's very close, and culturally is very similar to our market. Maybe Marcus, you could touch on this, and I know we spoke about it a little bit before, but Google Translate and those things are fine, but getting to understand the geographical and I would say the micro geographical culture pockets. I mean, how do you even go about starting to maybe network with the agents across there, the producers across there? What are the discoverable tools that you would use to kind of look at those kinds of things?
So at the
besides
beginning
going
of the
on the
pandemic,
ground.
besides like DMing and stuff?
No. Just besides on actually physically trying to get there and go to talk to everybody, because right now we can't do that.
Right. So I think, once again, the hashtag, to me, that's an untapped tool for a lot of anybody, whatever industry you're in. And I just tell you straight up, I would search Latin DJ hashtag, or I would start to check to see what, so there are DJ pools. DJ pools are really big, especially outside of Trinidad. And there's this, the BPM Latino is a big DJ pool. So I found their page and I just started to look at DJs on that page and message them, there, I know Pitbull has a radio station on Sirius FM. So I started to look at what DJs are on his station, because they would play Caribbean music and Latin music. And I would just really message them and just find out information. And in terms of understanding the cultural aspect a little more, that took time. That took I mean, I have a friend here who is half Venezuelan, half Trinidadian. She's a professional linguistic translator. She's a Spanish to English and English to Spanish translator. So initially she would have helped me with when I was attempting to write more in Spanish. I would also just message people randomly, like there's this guy who writes for Mark Anthony and Jennifer Lopez, and my song Pronto, I messaged him and I just asked him his opinion, and he responded and he told me, he gave me advice. He said, how I'm using minimal Spanish, it may not make full sense in their community. It just sounds like a kind of saying random things. So he was saying, I now have to try to make it, so try to complete a sentence, try to, certain things we say, because Google Translate helps, but you still need that person on the ground to, it's almost like an authenticity proofreader, or somebody who's vouching for your authenticity. So I've done that for different markets. I know we focusing on the Latin market, but I did a song in Albanian recently, and the producer's from Albania, and I asked him, what's a slang in Albania? And he told me Heide, right? And Heide means let's go. So I was able to be simple there, but it was effective. And just one more thing really quickly, I've learned that, especially in the style of music I do, you can say what you want in the verse. They don't really care about what you're saying in the verse, but that hook or that chorus has to resonate with people. They have, no matter where you are in the world, if you are from Puerto Rico or Colombia, whatever you say in that chorus has to resonate to them. And I think that I started to look at how Sean Paul writes. Most people, I mean, we're from Trinidad. I don't even know all of what Sean Paul says in his verses, right? But I know that the hook is what catches people. So that's just something I learned along the way as well.
Okay, and then from a product perspective, Dhanraj, because I know ExporTT definitely has a lot of relationships with the Latin American market. Is there an aim to localize? Because I know a lot of artists do merchandise. Would that be something that you would see useful to localize merchandise for that Latin market?
Okay, let me go back to the point in terms of gathering information, right? Because I think maybe this is overlooked. Like all the foreign embassies and missions that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, we have quite a lot of them. And we might think that, well, these people can help us, they're diplomats and stuff like that. But they are very excited about working with us. I mean, we recently did some work with the Mexican embassy and MusicTT with a film festival. Mm-hmm. So similarly, I mean, if you need information, they're very willing to have that conversation with you and point you in the right direction, make some introductions, and help explain how the country is run and how it's structured and how, because they are from there, right? So I know in particular, Mexican embassy, Colombian, Chilean, we have worked with them before and they're very good. Even the Cuban embassy as well. So if you are interested in Latin America, it's worth having a meeting with them. It could be done virtually now, just to sort of get a sense, understand what the market is like, and if they have any contacts that they could pass on to you, because they might be able to pass on. Maybe there's a organization that's responsible for music across there, or an association or something like that you could start having a conversation with. So yeah, that's one of it. Localization. Yeah. With respect to products, that is something that we are looking at, because we do produce products, particularly food and beverage items, for the local taste or the regional taste and for the diaspora, because we often have a hard time trying to move from the diaspora, the areas of diaspora concentration in some of the North American, European markets, onto mainstream, right? So, think about like a bottle Cuchilla on a shelf, right? And it's in a mainstream supermarket. Most people are going to walk past and be like, well, what is that? And a Caribbean person will pick it up, hey, look, Cuchilla, way. Because the label, understand from the perspective of the consumer, right? You just see this kind of dark brown item in a bottle, and there's a name on it. You don't know how to use it, what is really in there. You can read the ingredients, but it's like you don't actually know what to do with it. So there's some education required there. So I think that is important if we're taking products across the market. Yes, we know about those products. They may not know about the products. So it's important that we have that education part of it, that sort of promotion, so that the consumer really understands. Maybe a recipe tagged on or something like that, so that they understand, this is how it's used. We are trying to focus a lot on product modification, and we have a program right now under the Export Booster initiative where we're looking at product modifications in terms of what is required to meet some of the local preferences. There's some packaging changes and stuff like that to do as well. We recently did some work in Chile, and they have an obesity problem, right? So they have taken some very strong initiatives to reduce that. So if your product has exceeds certain limits for calories, saturated fats and stuff like that, you actually have to put this big black stop sign on your packaging indicating that. So again, if somebody has to go and export to Chile, you'll have to do the testing first to measure those items, and then you'll have to change up your packaging to represent and meet those specifications, right? Taste as well, color, all these things sort of matters. I mean, some colors are offensive. Some, as strange as it may sound, like some colors might be affiliated with a certain political party. Some colors are affiliated with poison. And these things sort of matter. Like they will affect like a consumer's decision to say, well, hey, nah, I'm not down with red, or I'm not down with green. I'm not buying that. So it's important to understand these things and make the necessary adjustments to ensure that the products are received well by the customers in the market. Another weird example is that I think we were doing some work in DR, and there's a preference to square crackers rather than round crackers. So like if you had to export there, you need it, because it didn't, to them it's not a cracker if it's not square, right? So things like that. I mean, and that is important. That's why it's important. These things will show up in the data. Like if I look at the data for these products, you're not going to see square crackers. You're not going to see round crackers. You're just going to see crackers. And I think that is why it's important to really touch base with people on the ground so that they could give you that real info. So I would say like all the data, all the quantitative data that we get, you get your black and white lines, and then you talk to someone in the ground, and then you start adding the color, so then the picture becomes a little clearer for you.
And just, I mean, I don't have any direct input on Marte's question, but I just want to emphasize something for anybody who's listening to this discussion, right? Dhanraj just said something, and Marcus would have been speaking about this, and I want to emphasize it, right? Just the perspective of a consumer. I encourage all artists to make the necessary effort. You might think it isn't worth anything, but just like Dhanraj was describing, that difference between a square and a round cracker, it doesn't make any sense to you, but it makes total sense to them. And you have to be focused on the person who's going to put out the money and consume your product. So you have to understand and put that effort in. And I think just in my experience, I think that a lot of artists don't consider their consumer as much as they should. So I just want to encourage artists to really look at those characteristics and understand the importance of putting that amount of effort into understanding your consumer, because those are the details that are going to make the difference between somebody buying your product and not buying your product.
Yeah, I just want to say, Dhanraj, you dropped some gems there in terms of especially the embassy. Even that never crossed my mind, but that's something that I think especially artists in Trinidad don't take advantage of. Maybe because we only focus on the US embassy, but I totally agree with everything you said regarding like the tailoring of products, and I just trying to put it in a musical format. So just lyrics, visuals, especially just doing things in a way that, I think it's important. We, as Trinidadians, we do speak fast. We do have our own slang, which is beautiful, which is exotic. But I think there's just like food, as you mentioned, kuchila and, packaging stuff. I think that we just need to be aware that sometimes, so for me, sometimes I simplify certain aspects of my music, especially in the chorus, just so that if you don't speak English, you understand something. So just wanted to mention as well.
No, the language is important because I think you travel across Latin America, most people could speak some English, but then you don't know any Spanish. So there's like this sort of lack of reciprocity, a lack of effort on our part. That usually doesn't really go down that well. I mean, nobody's gonna say it to your face or anything like that. But if you're looking to build a relationship, I think communication is key. And going through a translator, going through Google Translate, and not really understanding the nuances about our language, because Spanish differs so much across these different countries in terms of the slangs and stuff like that. So I think that is important. Like if we are looking at a particular market, understanding the culture, knowing some of the language, you don't need to know a lot of it, but just the attempt, that says a lot,
All right. So, we have like 1 minute left. So I just want to thank everybody. Some of us will be in the networking meetup later so that y'all can ask us questions directly. I mean, I would urge you to take advantage because these people know way more about this thing than you possibly know. And I guarantee you with that, this is an amazing panel. I want to thank everybody again. And see you all later at the networking.
All right, cool.
Take care.